Hi there and welcome to today's vlog. Today is hoodie day. How about that? Not so sure really. I've been reading in my Bible readings recently, last few days, from the book of 1 Kings and 2 Kings, where we hear about the kings of Judah and Israel particularly, and for each king there is a kind of God's judgment of their life. I'll come to that in a minute, but first of all, let me tell you a true story. This happened to me quite a number of years ago. I won't tell you where I was at the time or give you the name of the person involved, but I had a phone call from an elderly lady who was a member of one of my churches, and she lived not too far from me, and asked me if I'd go around and see her. Well, I didn't have anything on that evening, so I said, yeah, of course, I'll come around and see you. And as I walked to her house, I was kind of wondering what she had in mind. What did she want to talk about? Did she have some sort of issue that she needed help with? Anyway, we sat down in her front room and entered into a bit of chat, and then she told me how she'd been involved in the life of that particular church for just about all her life. She was probably in her late 70s, I would guess, or maybe even a little bit older. She'd during that time been a really important part of the church, and she'd seen many ministers come and go over that time. And to cut a long story short, she summed it up by saying to me, well, you, in all the ministers we've had, you are at the bottom of the pile. You are the worst of the lot, which brought me great encouragement, of course. And one of the accusations she threw at me was that I used the Bible too much when I was preaching. Well, I didn't mind that accusation at all. I believe if we don't preach from the Bible, what are we preaching? But anyway, that incident has stuck with me. It wasn't a great encouragement, as you might imagine, but there's always a temptation, not just for church leaders, but in any walk of life, any individual, there's always a temptation, isn't there, to be a people pleaser, because we want to be liked, we want to be appreciated by other people. And yet that temptation can be our undoing, because we can focus sometimes more on pleasing people than on pleasing God. And that brings me to I'll just take a few examples from the second book of Kings. Give you the name of some of the kings, and then the writer gives God's judgment. Jeroboam the second of Israel, as far as God was concerned, he lived an evil life. Azariah of Judah, he did well in the eyes of God. Zechariah of Israel, he lived a bad life before God. Pekahiah of Israel, in God's eyes, he lived an evil life. Pekah of Israel, in God's view, he lived an evil life. Jotham of Judah, he acted well in God's eyes. Ahaz of Judah, he didn't behave in the eyes of God. And let's finish with Hoshea of Israel. As far as God was concerned, he lived a bad life. It goes on to say, but not nearly as bad as the kings who had preceded him. It's God's perspective on our lives that is important, not people. Yeah, of course, we don't want to go out of our way to offend others, to upset them, but we must put pleasing God first, which isn't always easy. And that's really in my thoughts at the moment, thinking of how God looks on the lives of these various kings. How does he look on my life? How does God look on your life? God is not a God with a big stick wanting to beat us up when we go wrong. He's God of grace and forgiveness and mercy. But our aim, our goal, with God's help, the help of God, the Holy Spirit, should be to live our lives to please God. Live our lives in a way that honours Him. So there's my reflection today. Maybe food for thought for all of us. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening today.